Welcome to Exploring the Ozarks, where we tell the history and stories of locations, organizations, and people from the area. Here's Matt.
I'm really glad we found that applause there toward the end of that.
I know. It just makes you feel better whenever it starts.
Yeah,
You're just like, people actually are listening.
Yeah, you can have a whole audience without knowing it.
I'm going to say that people out there, I know you're cheering. They're cheering right now with us, with the audience. But it's like, put a comment below, like, just let us know.
We're cheering for you. Welcome to Exploring the Ozarks, guys. This is Matt Graham, Vice President with Central Bank Mortgage, and you have tuned into Exploring the Ozarks. We're here today at Springfield Studio One.
There we go.
For this podcast. Check them out if you need to record your own podcast, put on a small play. They've got a theater in there. You can play some music if you want to film a music video, anything like that. That's for
all
videos.
Sorts of things,
all sorts of stuff. You want to put on a play, they got that too. But if you just need your own space to rent for an event, they have that as well. So thanks for sponsoring this. Our other sponsors that we don't talk about nearly enough, of course, Central Bank, Creative Endeavors with David Carr, VIP Marketing. We love VIP Marketing. They do a
all
good
our
job
social
for us.
media. Yeah.
And then, who else?
Who else
did we put up there?
Right now.
Right now, okay.
Yeah, we got some people in the pipeline, I think. So
we do.
Just gotta get them out here.
Yeah, and then David, go ahead and hit him with some Patreon.
Patreon. So if you are an individual and don't have $1,000 laying around, you want to donate a month. Though if you do, please donate it. We have Patreon, which enables you to donate $5, $10, $25 a month, and that really goes a long way in supporting what we're doing here. We don't charge to have people on here, and we do try to help out in the community quite a bit and doing all that, organizing all that. Organizing guests, making sure that social media is done properly and that we get their message out there does take quite a bit. So anything that you can do to support us, and Patreon is a great way to do that. It gives you a chance to do it on a monthly basis. Yeah, it's much appreciated.
And if you want to support some stuff we're doing, we just literally in one of our last segments came up with an adopt a highway and trash cleanup idea. So that will be fun for us. But yes, this is a labor of love.
Fun.
So.
Labor, yes, fun labor, yes. Well, and I was telling Jake that actually between this podcast and that last one, it's like, I know we talked about maybe because he had mentioned doing some sort of like a party, like something in the park, which we may also do at some point. But I was like,
might as well clean up some trash while we're at it.
I was like, I like doing stuff where you're doing physical labor, helping the community, making sure that you're improving things.
Well, and James River Water Basin Partnership does a huge cleanup, and then they do a huge party afterwards.
That may be a good combination there.
Yeah, maybe guide some people over to do that too.
People are seeing this develop over like 2 weeks of podcasts. This is good. This is good.
Yeah. So, and if you want to check us out, find us on YouTube, Facebook, of course, TikTok, Instagram, all the other podcasting sites like Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you can find a podcast, you're going to find us.
Yeah.
So today's guest is somebody that David calls me a fanboy. I consider him a legend, and I do, with Exploring the Ozarks, people start thinking immediately, getting outdoors, doing things, right? I immediately thought about that myself whenever we first started this. But when I first started this, we thought, I thought in one particular mindset of I've got to have one person, and that is Tim Ernst. Tim Ernst, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for bringing yourself onto this podcast all the way from Arkansas. Too bad you couldn't be here in person, but you've got a whole gallery we're going to talk about that you're getting up and going, and you've got it open and people can come visit and all that. So you do have a business to run, so we get that.
Well, thankfully there's no snow, because he's telling me before you came in here about how he had to use his snowshoes, or he got the opportunity to use his snowshoes.
When was that? Here recently? Just the last snow we had?
Yeah, back in December. We had, I think, 16 inches here.
Holy smokes.
It was really good snow. It was packed and wasn't real wet, so snowshoes were the order of the day. It was great fun for a few days.
Well, I bet that made for some good photography. I'm assuming.
I'd be taking a lot of foot shots and on purpose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tim's one of those guys, though, that if it wasn't for Tim, I don't know if my passion for the buffalo or for hiking in general would be as big as it is now. Whenever I first kind of came back from St. Louis that we've talked about before, I started going, gosh, I've got to get out and explore this area that I've lived in my whole life. And I thought, where can I go? That's probably one of the most beautiful spots that you can find, and it's the Buffalo River. It's one of the true gems of the United States, or even in the world, really, that there's so many places to go, so many things to see. But unless you have a guidebook that shows you where to go, what to do, all these little hidden gems along the way, you're kind of lost. I used a map first before I found Tim. I literally had a map of the Buffalo River from end to end, topographical map.
Is that the one hanging up in your house?
Yeah, it was basically a whole big, huge whiteboard that I had tacked on a map, and it was topographical. So I knew elevations. I'd studied it a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I know Steel Creek. I know Kyle's Landing. I know the Boston Mountains. I know Lower Wilderness. I know Boxley Valley, Lost Valley, all these places. And I thought, well, shoot, how am I going to fine tune this, right? And then I'm just Googling stuff, I think, and I started looking online, and I see this waterfall book, and I'm like, oh, it's spring. There's got to be some waterfalls.
Yeah.
And then I go, okay, Tim Ernst. So I'm like, well, let's look into Tim Ernst a little further. And Tim's got a myriad of books on everything you can do that is hiking or outdoors down in Arkansas. So, Tim, first of all, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here. Appreciate you guys.
And thank you for being such a good, I'm going to call you a virtual mentor to me because, and it's not just me. I know so many people that rely on Tim's books. And
we had Chad Bay on a couple weeks ago that mentioned.
Chad Bay with Chasing the Ozarks. He uses your books quite frequently. Almost every weekend he gets down there from Kansas, I think is where he's from. And he uses your books quite heavily. I mean, I promise you, almost every time I go to the Buffalo, I see somebody that's got a Tim Ernst book pulling it out of their backpack.
That's great. Glad to hear it.
Well, usually it's because they used your book, they thought they knew where they were, and then they got to get their book out again to go, where am I?
That sounds right.
Well, Tim's books are so descriptive.
That'd be me.
Well, and it was me the first time too. I thought it'd be really cool to go try Hemden Hollows, right? Yeah. Hemden Hollows is it what, 278-foot waterfall? Is that right, Tim?
208.
208. So it's the biggest waterfall between the Smoky Mountains and the Rocky Mountains.
Okay, yeah. And
it's right in the Buffalo, about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from most people here in the Springfield area. And I thought, well, I've got to see that. But I did see it. The problem was getting out. So we went to the top of the Rim Trail, which is what it's called, and you're not supposed to really take that. You're supposed to stay on the main trail. Some really awesome views. And luckily, Tim's book did describe some things that I was on. The problem was it was getting late, and I was too far away from the main trail to make it back and still be able to make it up in time before it was dark. And so I was like, well, honey, we're just going to have to walk up the side of this mountain, basically. And so I put...
This is one of our short clips now.
Yeah, I'm going to have to... I don't want to recreate it, but I put the book away because I knew I was going to have to basically use these trees as a ladder to get up about a mile up this mountain. And the whole time I'm thinking, I bet Tim Ernst didn't do this.
I heard him chuckle. I think maybe he has at some point.
Few times.
Yeah, he knows what I'm talking about. But, as far as, we want to dive into who Tim Ernst is, right? So to me, you're a legend. To me, your legend will live on even after we're all gone because of the library of books that you come up with. So how many books have you written this far?
A lot more than I've read. I'm not a very good reader. I was a terrible student. But we, my wife and I have our own little publishing company, and I think we've got 18. We've got 18 books in print right now. That most of them are mine. Her and her daughter have written a guidebook, Arkansas Day Hikes for Kids.
I've got that one too. Yeah,
those are all easy hikes, and then I've done a bunch of them on the different trails in Arkansas and Buffalo National River, and of course the waterfalls is one of my most favorite ones. And then there's Arkansas Nature Lovers Guidebook, which is kind of interesting because even though I grew up in Arkansas, and I'm pushing 70, I'm almost I'll be 70 in a couple of years. So I've been here, lived here my whole life.
Okay.
Wow.
They've been trying to get rid of me for about 50 of those years. But when I did work on that guidebook, I basically had been a nature photographer pretty much in the Ozarks. I'd never been to other parts of the state, photographically speaking. And when I started working on that book, I discovered so many other places and in Arkansas, and it's the same thing with Missouri, that most people just don't know about and haven't been highly publicized before. And as an example, in Arkansas, we have a lot of great swamplands that are protected swamplands.
Over on the east side, I assume, right?
Yeah, part of them thanks to the ivory-billed woodpecker that may or may not have been rediscovered in some of these swamps.
Oh, wow.
So more have been protected. But So the Arkansas Nature Lovers Guidebook has over 100 different places that are just kind of natural areas, and some of them are trails, some of them are swamps, some of them are boating areas or rock climbing areas. And as part of our small public publishing company that my wife and I do, we did a similar book to Missouri. And I don't want to get into plugging all the books here, but
please do.
a Missouri expert and resident for a long time, Don Kurz is his name. He's also a wildflower expert and trees and worked for Missouri Department of Conservation for many years, acquiring neat pieces of property in Missouri for the state. Okay. And so we had him do a similar guidebook on Missouri, and that's one of the popular guidebooks that we sell. It's Missouri's Natural Wonders, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
So we probably got over the years. I've also done guidebooks on smaller trails that have eventually been incorporated with these other guidebooks, and I'm still working on expanding a lot of them. Like the Ozark Highlands Trail, for instance, is...
Oh, man, that's a book in itself, yeah.
Yeah, I started working on that. Actually, I was working for the Forest Service, and they hired me to go out and take pictures of the youth group that had started to build that trail in 1977. And then the Forest Service abandoned the project a few years later, and we started the Ozark Highlands Trail Association, which is the volunteer group that continued to build the trail and completed it to the Buffalo River and maintains the entire trail.
Wow.
And is since working with other groups to get it completed to the Missouri state line and connect with the Ozark Trail.
So how long is that trail?
It's a pretty long trail. I didn't realize it was hooking up to the Ozark Trail. That's a big deal. That's a long, long trail. But just for the Ozark Highlands Trail, how long is that? Because you do that in segments. You usually don't do that whole trail.
Well, there's right now there's continuous or contiguous trails 207 miles from Lake Fort Smith to Dillard's Ferry on the Buffalo River. Man. And then there's several other sections done and between there and the Missouri border. Eventually it'll be over 300 miles and then connect with the Ozark Trail, which is that long or longer whenever it's completed. So we'll have one of the major, in my opinion, and very scenic long-distance backpacking trails right in mid-America from basically Lake Fort Smith State Park to St. Louis.
That's what I was going to say. I'm pretty sure it was St. Louis is where it starts, and it heads down like I-55 almost, and then it veers off a little bit to stay in the mountains, a little bit over toward like the 11-Point River,
then goes down to Buffalo,
and all that.
River.
And then it ends up down near the Buffalo, which is, I mean...
How long would it take to even hike it like that? Like a couple weeks, wouldn't it?
No, that would take you probably a few months, I would say.
A few months?
Yeah, a couple months easily.
Obviously, I'm not a hiker.
Well,
I have done 50 milers. I should say I have done hiking.
That's a big deal. Well, let's put it in
I'm not like a big...
You put it in perspective, and a lot of people do the Appalachian Trail, right? So the Appalachian Trail goes from basically northern Georgia all the way to Catadin, Maine, right?
Oh,
so it goes a
long
long ways, and I think most people complete that in, what is that, about 3 months, you think, Tim? Probably 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, something like that.
And that's just constant walking, though.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of elevation change.
Not stopping to smell the roses or take pictures.
Maybe. Well, you're going to have to because you're going to be pretty freaking tired. I know that.
Yeah, I would imagine. So,
but this is a huge labor of love on all ends of what you do, Tim. So when you say you're getting ready for another book, walk us through how you come up with these. Because, and the only reason I ask that is because when you look at one of your books and you look at just one trail that he talks about how to get to the trailhead from certain highway landmarks. Then you get to the trailhead. Then it's almost 1/10 of a mile by 1/10 of a mile. He's got something he's talking about along that way as a landmark to know where you're at. Wow. He knows the mileage of it almost perfectly, actually. I've tried to debunk his mileage on his trail maps and stuff, and I can't do it. I come within 100 feet almost every time, and I've been tempted to just take out a tape measure with me every time, but that would take way too long. So, I mean, for you to do this, number one, when you are getting ready for a trail and you're like, okay, I've not done this one yet, I want to go explore that. How do you get ready for that? And then do you just describe things along the way? Walk us through how you come up with how to get to these trails and what inspires you to do that.
Well, I'll give you a couple of quick examples because they're two different things. One of them, the Ozark Highlands Trail Guidebook, is one of them I'm getting ready to do a major redo of next year. And It started out as a map because we were building the trail, and there was no information about the trail, no social media,
Right.
no trailheads, no nothing.
Right.
And we actually needed people to hike the trail to help keep it open.
Oh.
And it was in short sections, and we were trying to connect those sections and then, make a reasonably long backpacking trail out of it. And one day I sat down and hired a cartographer to actually draw a map of what we had completed and kind of fill in the blanks of the mileages and drainages and stuff like that. So I had printed, and this is, I guess, the beginning of our publishing company. It was just me back then. 1,000 of these maps that had the proposed trail from end to end that we had figured out where we wanted it to go, and then the sections that we had already completed and the sections that had not been completed yet. And then below that was just a very, very short paragraph or two description of each section from here to here and what the mileage was. And we knew the mileages because, and I've always done this from the very beginning, because when I'd hike out west where there's a lot of trails and a lot of documentation, the documentation was almost always wrong
Right.
as far as mileage goes.
I've noticed that.
And that always kind of pissed me off.
I'm so glad it did, though, too.
So I've always been a stickler for accuracy, and I learned early on, and this is way before GPS, to use a surveyor's measuring wheel.
Oh.
It's kind of like a bicycle wheel on a stick,
Yeah.
literally, and it has a couple of odometers on it that go off clicks every foot.
Right.
And pretty much until recently, all the mileages in all my books were literally rolled off with that wheel.
That's insane.
Foot by foot by foot. So
Is that wheel somewhere mounted like a trophy?
Well, that's in its third. Two of them have been thrown away, worn out and thrown away, and now it's in its.
Listen, you ever throw one of those away? I want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
put it in my Tim Ernst shrine that I have at home.
In 1983, Backpacker magazine had me do a feature article for them about this new backpacking trail, the Ozark Highlands Trail, which was the first. It was the first article I'd ever written. I mean, I was still in my 20s, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was a college dropout, but I had pictures. I had lots of pictures because I started doing nature photography in 1975. So they published this feature article in their magazine, a national magazine, and which was great, and I got paid for that. But of course, they edited almost everything out that I said, and because it wasn't very good. Wasn't very good writing. Right. I didn't care. They sent me a check, but at the very end of it said, for a map of the trail, send $4 to Tim Ernst at this address.
Oh, wow.
And I got over 10,000 orders from that.
Whoa!
Which is a lot more than I had, so I had to get it reprinted. But
so they paid you for the article, and then they advertised for you, and then you got all. That's really nice.
And that's when it light bulb went off that people will buy information.
Oh yeah.
But along with each map that was sent out, I sent out a membership application for our volunteer hiking club that was building the trail.
Oh, wow. Smart.
And during the year after that, we got several hundred members from states all over the country and several foreign countries. And that basically is the reason the Ozark Highland Trail exists today, is because our local volunteers got a tremendous amount of help from other states, from people that would come here from all over to hike the trail that we'd already built, and then come back and help build it and do maintenance on it. So
it's like an international community of hikers right there.
Yes, right.
That's really cool.
That's so funny because almost every podcast we have something similar that someone says about how they brought people together, how one thing was able to bring these type of people together from all over the world. And the hiking community is a big community. Especially during COVID. When COVID hit, that was one of the first things I thought of. Well, everything's shut down. Well, hell, I'm going out to the woods. I live in the woods. But I was like, I got to go further into the woods.
Because everybody else was there.
Right. So, you know what I did was first thing I did was picked up my Tim Ernst books and go, okay, which ones have I not checked off this? Because he has a full checklist on the back of waterfalls or on his other hiking books of which, Ozark Highlands Trail, what sections and things
Sounds
like
like
that.
I need to get me a Tim Ernst
You
book.
need to get you a Tim Ernst book.
I haven't gotten one
The
yet.
best part is being able to mark that off, that you check mark, that you got that one done.
Yeah.
So at that point, it becomes, I've got to do the next one, right? So how do I keep going, right? But I don't know. I mean, I've been slacking lately because I had kids. But I think my kids probably have more miles on their boots than most grown people do, most adults do. And
well, as they get older, that'll be a great family bonding activity.
Absolutely. It already is. Yeah, we love it.
Getting back to your question, the way that I approached the guidebook was I wanted to write something that I, as a hiker, could use to keep me from getting lost and give me the information that I needed. And I had a lot of guidebooks from elsewhere, as you mentioned, and I just, I kind of said, okay, that's great, but what about this and what about that? So I sat down with a blank sheet, literally, and figured out what I wanted in a book. And the actual way that I went about it is I took my measuring wheel and a tape recorder, and I recorded the driving directions to the trailhead.
Oh, smart.
And then I would push my wheel ahead of me along the trail, and I would tape record anything I saw that caught my interest, the general lay of, you wind around the hillside here and climb up and go through that saddle, and then when you get to the top, there's a forest road that you cross, or you turn right or left.
Yeah. Or look out for the washout that comes down, or a creek that washes down and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
And making notes all the time about the mileages on the wheel.
So it's like a reverse Siri there,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he was the first Siri.
The trail Siri.
Yeah. But one of my guidebooks, Arkansas Hiking Trails, there's I think there's 78 trails in there at the time that I put it together, and the tape recorder was literally a cassette tape recorder, and I would have when I get back at the end of the hike, I would put that tape on the shelf and mark it, and then I would put a new tape in and go do another trail.
Oh.
And I did that book in about a year. I covered all the trails, doing all of the documentation and descriptive work. And then I sat down at the computer to put the book together, and I thought, holy crap, this is just too much.
That is a lot. That is a lot.
And so it sat on the shelf. Those tapes sat on the shelf for a year. And what was too much was the next step 2, was to listen to all of them.
Oh, my gosh.
And write the information down.
I can relate to that as a videographer.
Yeah.
There you
going through
go.
hours and hours of video just to kind of get that 1 or 2 minutes of information that you need. Yeah, I mean, that is hard to do, and I can imagine with a cassette player and having to, you're talking probably, thousands of hours that you have to go through to listen to?
Yes.
Yeah, that's just...
Sounds insurmountable, yeah.
Yes, it does.
So that literally was how I approached the books, was what do I need? I hired somebody to draw the maps, and I did all the text, and I only used 1 or 2 editors that were usually family members, and so my guidebooks are written basically the way I talk, and probably not the way they should be. But
well, that's what is, I think, the best part about it, Tim, is when I'm reading that book and I'm getting ready to go on a trail, it's like you're walking me through it and I can imagine it, And then once you get on the trail, it's like you are so familiar with the trail, it feels like you've been there before. And that's huge, because I have other guidebooks that I can get lost with them because they don't describe anything. They tell you about the trailhead, maybe. They tell you about the road or things like that, but they don't say what you just said. What you just described is why I call it a labor of love, because you literally walk people almost step by step down through a trail so descriptively that I literally feel like I've already been on that trail by the time I'm done reading it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of funny, after doing two or three guidebooks like that, I got a call from some publishing company that wanted for me to contribute to somebody else's guidebook.
Uh-oh.
Looks like our phone call cut out.
Before we lost the call, Tim was talking about a publishing company that called him to try to help some other author, I'm assuming, try to write a book. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's correct. And I was really surprised because they said, could you do the text for this trail, and this trail? And I said, well, now, wait a minute. There's somebody else who is the author of that book You mean they're not doing the actual? They hadn't been on the trail? Oh no.
Oh, no.
They can't go to all these trails. There's too many trails. And people ask me a lot of times, how many of the trails in your book have you actually been to? And I'm always flabbergasted. Well, all of them, of course. How else would I know to write about them?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
quite honestly, a lot of hiking trail guidebooks are not written by the people whose name is on the cover.
And that stands out to me
that
too.
surprised me.
You know, but after reading your books, that's I can totally imagine that, because I read those, and like I said, that's where I was headed earlier, was I can read those books and still feel like I've got some landmarks along the way. They're not very descriptive like Tim's are. Now there's probably tens of thousands of trails in just the United States, but no one does it like Tim does. And I could see why they called you to get you to do some description for him, because the way you describe it is so good. Now, was this other author, was that an Arkansas book, or was that a different state?
I probably shouldn't comment on that. I will say, though, I have talked kind of the opposite side of that. I've had other authors want to do hiking trail guidebooks and wanting to know a good way to go about it and stuff. And I'm always happy to give them recommendations. And that's the first thing I tell them is, do it yourself and do it the way you think you would like it done.
Yeah.
Do it the way you want it done.
That's very true.
And I know Missouri has the Ozark Trail in Missouri, and then Missouri Hiking Trails books, and they're done by real people that get out and hike them and then write about them.
You know, you
Nice.
kind of have
Yeah.
to, though. I mean, the way you have your process, it sounds simple when you talk about it, but you're talking about having to go back and re-listen to this and then put it on paper and then publish all of this.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
This is all before, AI and those other
Right.
things that could transcript.
Well, and you didn't have an assistant with you.
Didn't have
You
an assistant,
You
yeah.
didn't have somebody else doing any of this for you. So what year did you start getting all of this on paper and actually go out and start on working on these trails before you made your first book, right?
Right. Yep. 1981 is when we first started with the Ozark Highlands Trail Association doing
Wow.
volunteer trail work.
I didn't realize that. So that was that your first first trails that you actually went out and described to put on paper?
Yes, but we had to build it first.
Right.
Yes.
That helps.
If you build it, they will come, as they
So
say.
that's step one. If it isn't there, you got to build it first.
That's for sure. And that's all. And what's important about that is that's all volunteers, right?
Yes, most of it, all the early years are volunteered. Some of the trail, particularly around Lake North Fork, that is going up to the Missouri border is contracted and machine built as multi-use trail, which is great. They're able to do much longer runs. But the Ozark Trail in Missouri and most of the Ozark Highlands Trail in Arkansas are by and large literally labors of blood, sweat, and tears from volunteers.
Well, and that says a lot about you guys. I mean, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities around the Springfield area. I think there's over 2,900 nonprofits or whatnot. I recently just got hooked up with a girl that we're actually going to have on our show that is with the Sierra Club here in Springfield. And the Sierra Club's all over the world, actually. But she's our local person. That's the point person for Sierra Club. And they're a huge club. But they do a lot of trail building and things like that. They're also going to be working on that Ozark Highlands Trail that's going to run all the way up to St. Louis or connect with the Arkansas portions. Yeah. So since 1981, you guys have been working on just the Ozark Highlands Trail alone. How many miles is that altogether, you said, between where it starts to where it is now?
Well, the original was 165 miles. Right now it's 207 contiguous, which includes 43 miles of the Buffalo River Trail.
Man.
And then there's another 31-mile Sillamore section, and then there's 20 or 30 miles already built around Lake North Fork, and then there's more of that being built every week.
I got a new goal. I got a new goal.
And it's beautiful. I mean, every part of it's beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to not find a spot that's not beautiful as you walk.
And you
through
camp.
that.
You can camp along this trail.
You
I'm
do
assuming.
camp along those,
Yeah.
yeah, you bet, because those are multi-day trips. Usually.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because the Buffalo River, from what I remember, it used to not even be connected from the upper end, they call it, which would be the west end, down to the eastern side of it, which would be over toward the eastern Arkansas. That trail in itself, the Buffalo River National Trail, it wasn't connected at every point. Am I right about that at one point, Tim?
Well, the Buffalo River Trail is in two different sections.
There you go.
There's an upper section that's 37 miles, and the lower section that's 43 miles, which is what is tagged on as part of the Ozark Highlands Trail. Those two sections are not connected. There is I forget how many miles it is between Pruitt and Woolham.
Yeah.
There is no trail there, nor is there any trail downstream of Highway 14 at Dillard's Ferry.
Yeah.
But that will be hopefully someday built through the lower area, and as part of the Ozark Highlands Trail.
Yeah.
And that all of those trails that we just talked about will be part of what's called the Trans Ozarks Trail.
Okay.
That includes the Ozark Trail in Missouri, the Ozark Highlands Trail in Arkansas, and the Buffalo River Trail section that goes along the Ozark Highlands Trail and through the Sycamore and through the Lake Norfolk section. So there's a lot of smaller trails in there, but the overall package that we sat down and kind of put together in the late 1970s, 1980, the vision of it between Missouri and Arkansas is the Trans Ozarks Trail.
Wow. And that encompasses a lot of really cool areas. And one of the coolest parts about the lower section is that is a completely, unadulterated, what they call wilderness. It is no houses, hardly any roads in and out unless you're getting to the river.
Yeah.
But it literally, on your maps, it's funny when you see the maps of it or the national park maps or whatnot, is it basically has this yellow grid over it to warn you that is wilderness. Like when you're in there, the only way out is a helicopter.
Oh, no.
And most of the time when you're on the Buffalo, it's going to be a volunteer organization that goes and they do rescue people, and they rescue people quite often. I feel like one of the biggest reasons I love Tim's book is because I bet you've saved a lot of people's asses on that trail, because I know a lot of people that aren't prepared to go on these trails. They go anyways, right? Or they go floating and they're not ready for it. Mm-hmm. But you got to start somewhere, I always say. But having Tim's book.
Certainly the more popular outdoor activities become, the more people are going to go out there unprepared. But that's kind of up to all of us that do what we're doing right now, is to try and kind of gently show people the way, and be kind of a mentor to them on any level, to say, hey, come on a hike with us. Let's go floating. Let's go explore this or explore that. And particularly young people, it's so great to see parents out with their kids when they're old enough to walk. You don't have to be a teenager in order to put on a backpack or go on a day hike.
Yeah.
And so it's great to see parents doing that, and seeing groups of kids get together and do it responsibly and do it safely, and kind of gradually work yourself into it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even the Boy Scouts took advantage of it. They've got Camp Horror down there by Kyle's Landing, and it's one of the most beautiful places you'll ever see in Twin Falls. If you're lucky, there's triple falls there. It's double most of the time. Mm-hmm. The road to get to it is pretty treacherous, though, but it's worse than the hike by far. But
been on roads like that before.
You definitely want to have a 4x4 in most of these cases. But going back to doing it before, my kids did it before they could even walk. I had a Kelty backpack that I would just stick my son in it, and he loved it. I mean, he'd fall asleep most of the time. We'd be out looking for morels or something like that, and he'd be asleep on the back. But we did so many miles with just him on my back.
That's awesome.
Hideout Hollow is one of the coolest ones that I remember taking him on, and my daughter. And if it wasn't for that Kelty pack, I wouldn't have been able to go out and do that much because he wasn't ready for it, right?
Yeah.
We have since handed that backpack down to someone else that had their kids, and they like to hike. And one of the coolest things was seeing them basically with the Tim Ernst book in their hand, and they had the waterfall behind them, and they had their kid on their back, right? So
that's great to hear about.
You know what I mean? So what you're doing travels generations. I mean, you're spanning so many different generations. So what year was your first book written, Tim?
Ozark Highlands Trail Guide.
That 81?
Yeah, well, it didn't get published until 1988, which is after we built the trail. Then I was able to do the guidebook.
There you go. Okay, so you worked on that for 7 years pretty much. So
long time.
Did it just become natural for you to be like, okay, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to continue going on all of these trails? Because you have to imagine every book's got, at least 20, 30 trails on it?
Well, some of them just have one trail on it that's 200 miles long.
Right.
But most of them have 75 to 100 trails.
75 to 100 trails, and this guy did every single one of them, right? So, Tim, I got to tell you, what I want to ask is, do you have any idea how many miles you've walked?
Oh gosh.
No, although now I've got one of these watches on me all the time. Just about every evening at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, I look down to take it off, and it's like, oh, nope, I still got 2 more miles to go before that silly circle goes around. So I put my
I bet your
boots on
circle is set to like 50 miles or something, though, right?
Gosh, man. Well,
actually, just today, and by the way, I know this is recorded, but today's March 1st, and it is the 51st anniversary of the Buffalo National River being created.
Very cool. What a coincidence we're on today.
Yeah, it is also the first day of my training. I'm getting ready to after I got shamed by my daughter, who works in Springfield, by the way. Her and her boyfriend hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back one day last winter, and now I'm going to do it here in the end of this month. So
oh my gosh!
I'm going to have to get into shape to do that, and the main thing I'm going to use to get in shape is hike to Indian Hollow and back.
Oh, smart move.
And my goal is to do it. I figure to go down and back from the Compton Trailhead 4 times in one day is about like doing the Grand Canyon.
Oh my gosh.
You can't see Matt's face right now, but it's like it has this wild look of like, what in the world?
You will when this comes out. Holy smokes, man. Doing it one time is enough.
I believe it.
4 times and you're 70 years old, I feel really terrible about my fitness
I already
level.
was impressed by
almost 70. I'm not there yet.
Almost 70.
Well, it's just around
weird. I am kind of weird because I really enjoy the uphill more than the downhill.
Oh, well,
wow.
I can see that because going downhill, your legs burn a little different. Your hips burn, your knees burn a little bit more. Your hamstrings are usually a little stronger, so going uphill's not nearly as bad for me, too. Going downhill, though, my knees will be screaming by the time I'm done down at the bottom of
shins,
Hemden Hollows.
Yeah.
Well, my knees alone, just from the stress of it all. But
interesting.
So what gets you out of bed in the morning, Tim? Is it just because you know that you've got to spread the word for this stuff and educate people, or what?
Well, I actually just love to get up in the morning. As a photographer, the nature photographer, the best light of the day is frequently before sunrise.
Right.
And if you're laying in bed looking out the window and that magical light is happening, you just missed it, buddy.
Oh, my gosh.
So you got to get up while it's still dark and get somewhere if you want to take a picture of something beside your yard that has that great light on it. So
Man.
I've always been a fan of early morning and late evening. So just getting up and getting out and get moving. I'm actually about as a crow flies just a couple miles from Hemden Hollow, where we live and where our gallery is, and there's about a half a mile trail between our gallery and our cabin here. Out in the we live in the greater Low Gap Mount Sherman Metroplex between Ponca and Boxley.
Oh gosh.
Or between Ponca and Jasper. I'm sorry.
Well, that's an unfortunate place to live, Tim. That's like one of the most beautiful places.
I get up every morning, have a cup of coffee, and then do a 2-mile hike, 2 laps from our cabin to the gallery and back, and then I'm wide awake and ready to do whatever.
I'd be ready for a nap, and I'm 41.
Yeah, geez.
But Tim, I love this. We are about to go. Is that accurate?
Yes.
With our stoppage. So Tim, before we go, first of all, this 40 minutes has absolutely flown by. We're going to do more of these with you if you would allow that moving forward. Tell us.
My time's cheap.
All right. I like hearing that. But ultimately we want to boost this because this is the epitome of why we started exploring the Ozarks, Tim. Yeah. And so far we've done pretty good with it. We've got a pretty good following, and I think this is going to help out a little bit more too. But what I want to do is boost you as much as possible for what we have. Tell everybody where your gallery is and where they can find you on social media and things like that.
Okay, well, we don't advertise much other than through our main webpage, which is just my name, and it's timernst.com. And there you can find schedules of when our gallery is open, which we're not open regular hours, but since we live nearby, we are open anytime we're home. And we have a lot of people come down here, just happen to be down for the weekend or coming down on a Wednesday, and we're happy to have them call or text or email and say, hey, are you there today? And if so, can we come by and see the gallery? And we're always thrilled to have people come by.
That's a nice,
and
easy way
gallery,
to run it, though. Yeah, that's nice and easy there.
Yeah, well, we're lazy and don't want to get up and work 7 days a week. So.
It sounds like you like to walk it, so I mean that's even better. You get
Correct.
to walk that trail while you're going to do some business while you're at it.
True.
You know.
But we also have a Facebook page, and we also have an online gallery page where you can literally see thousands and thousands of pictures from the Ozarks and other places, and we also sell our guidebooks and picture books through a distributor, and those are available from our main webpage. There's a direct click to our distributor where you can either order a mail order, or you can also get them at a lot of bookstores, outdoor stores, park visitor centers, and places like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what keeps us going. I mean, it's great to get out and hike and take pictures and all that, but people don't pay me to hike. People don't pay me to take pictures. We don't make any money or pay the bills unless we sell a book or a print.
Well, I'll tell you, Tim,
bottom line, that's what it's all about.
It is.
You guys know that too.
Absolutely. But, the biggest thing is that your photography is absolutely amazing. Anywhere I go, I think, what would Tim Ernst do with this picture or whatnot? And he's fine-tuned it over the years to be, I would say, probably one of the best photographers I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot, and you've inspired me to do the same. And you also have large prints that you're selling. I mean, how big are these prints that you've got in your gallery that are for sale and stuff?
Oh, I think the biggest one here right now is 4 or 5 feet wide, but sometimes we got 8 or 10 foot wide ones.
Oh my gosh!
We specialize in canvas prints, and it's.
We need one for our wall, David. I'm going to get us one for the wall.
Please, Tim.
Tim, we do need to run. We do want to respect your time as well, and thank you so much for coming on.
We really appreciate what you guys are doing, and thanks a lot for having me on.
Absolutely, Tim.
Awesome.
And, what we'll do is we'll keep in touch with you. I hope to be down at that gallery sometime, and we can come down and visit. And we want to follow you, follow your travels, follow your books. You got any books coming out anytime soon?
I'm working on them. I've got another update to the waterfall guidebook. I have another 100 waterfalls that I have to include in it, and I've got 500 or 600 that I've documented. So I got a 600.
All right, so it sounds like if you need any help, you let me know, all right?
Yeah.
I'll be more than happy to come walk around the woods with Tim Ernst and help you roll that measuring device on the way. So
it's going to be a long spring.
I bet it is, and I hope I can even keep up with you if I did go out with you. But that is a standing invitation, is to let me know if you ever need any help. I'm only an hour away from you. So,
good.
Tim, thank you so much, and everybody else, keep exploring the Ozarks. Thanks again for listening to Exploring the Ozarks. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our social media channels to help us keep exploring the stories of the Ozarks. If you're looking for more ways to support our show, we have sponsorships for businesses and Patreon for individual supporters. Check the links in the description for more details. Thanks for your support, and keep exploring the Ozarks.